So, welcome to Bunny's Designs. This is a live stream, impromptu Saturday. Wanted to have a bit of a play with my Derwent Pastels. I have the full set, and they look very similar to the Inktense blocks, but these are pastel. So what they enable you to do is ordinary pastels rub off on your hands, and these are a bit cleaner. So they have a slightly different binder, but they're still crumbly, so you do get still a really nice effect. And the reason I've got the pastel pencils out is the colours correspond. So all these pastels are numbered, but they're not named. But if you look at the number, see these are really dark. So I look up this one, which is 500. And if I look for 500, that's Ionian green. Sorry, that's 590, beg your pardon, 590. And 590 is chocolate colour. So that's chocolate. The next one is P630. And P630 is Venetian red. That's 570, and that one's 540. 540 is a blue. Is it 540? 540 is burnt umber. So they're okay, but it's quite nice to know what they're called. And because I use these quite a lot, I quite like that. And sometimes with this one, if I'm doing something, it's a small space, I can quickly go to the pencil and do a little bit of get a finer space than on a corner. So I tend to have my Derwent Pastels out as I go along. So I've picked out pastel 620 and 580, and I thought that would be quite nice to work in the Bennett Kliens Epic. So I've got a little bit of scribbly paper. I may have to put the pastels there just to tone the light down a little bit. It's too bright today, so I'll zoom in a bit and then we can see what I'm doing. And I can turn the camera a bit. Just come out a tidge. Should be able to see quite clearly. So I'm going to scratch where the deer is pale. I'm just using the corner. Just putting a little dab of colour. Now you could use a blending tool when you get the next colour on, but if you want to do this for a long time, or your hands hurt a bit, this is the perfect way, because blending is also a little bit repetitious on your fingers and your hands. So this way, just stroking the page, and you get the smallest little bit of colour out. And then I'm going to leave that little bit, and I'm just going to do the tail first. Now my hand is slightly raised because I have it on, resting on here. I think I'm going to use these 4 brushes. I've got these Royal Langnickel paintbrushes. I've got the round ones. They're about £4 or £5 each. So I bought a number 6, a number 8 and a number 4. And then I've got my Graduate De La Rowney 10-0 liner. Now I do have a massive pot of water, and I have a damp baby wipe. So I'm going to take the number 4. I think the number 4 is going to be big enough. And then I haven't blown, there's a bit of dust on there, but all we're doing is just taking a bit of a damp brush. And because it's damp, but you've got to clean your brush now because it's turned into a watercolour. So I may just have to use this dirty water, but I'm not doing white, so it'll be fine. So I have a little pot of water there. So I'm dunking into a pot of water, twist into a baby wipe, and then when the baby wipe's clean, you know that it's clean and it's just damp enough to just pick up that dust and churn it into a watercolour. And remember, this is a Bennett Epic, so it's not going to like a lot of water. You just got a damp brush. Now I would prefer doing this with a rigger, but I know a lot of people have trouble with a rigger, so I thought I'd just do it with this. But as long as a traditional watercolour brush would not be any good, because the minute you touch the tip, the water flushes out and you get lots of water, because that's what they're designed to do. This particular one, I'm trying to use the tip, and if I just use the tip and take all the moisture from the brush, it's not going to give me a lot of water. If you didn't twist it on a baby wipe, it would flood this page with water. And this page is quite thin. Now, it hasn't gone through, but you've got to be careful, and you can't go back over it. It's a one-trick pony, this. You do it once only. So the next thing to do is put a little bit of this down there. Again, dunk the brush, twist it to a baby wipe, twist it to a point. It's barely damp. Just use the tip. Now this is grayscale, so it's going to behave itself. I think this is probably a bit too red for this deer, but we've got a red deer, it's fine. So we're going to scratch colour. And if you think it is a bit too red, I suppose it doesn't matter now. And the reason I like this is quite a small space. So I can get 620. Oh, it is Venetian red. I can use Venetian red with the pencil, and it's identical. If I want to get to some smaller spaces. And again, make sure that that brush is barely damp, and manipulate that colour around. Now if you used a rigger, which is designed to just release the tiniest amount of colour and of water, you can actually watercolour on a Bible page. But just a barely damp rigger will do. And then you can tell when the brush isn't damp anymore. You dunk once, twist to a point. And if you see the little baby wipe, every scrap of pastel is being used. I don't know why Bungle's crying, but he is, bless him. Yeah, to try not to go back over things because it doesn't like it, so we'll do all the fawn colour. Just stroke the page, and then when you want some more water, you just twist to a point, and all that turns instantly. And you have to do a little bit at a time. Oh, Suzanne says, yes, you can do larger areas with and smaller areas with the pencils. Yeah, that's always a better idea. Bungle's come back in. Stop growling, Toffee. So we can put a little bit of this on the leg. And a highlight. And with more practice you learn where the edge is, so it's a little bit easier than that. Oh, so have you bought the same bushes? From Pony and some made from Ox. I used to have those, but I've found that because I'm not doing traditional art anymore, I don't need them. I still have them, but I don't kind of need them. I've got some Series 7 from Winsor Newton, the very expensive ones, and I must have had them 20 years, but I don't use them, and I don't find I come across to use them. But I do like the riggers, but they're all supposed to be okay. I just find for colour brushes and for colouring, for watercolouring, I don't really feel that I want to use really expensive paintbrushes. I save those for watercolouring, if that makes any sense. So because I've stopped talking, that brush is so just barely damp, it will have dried out, so you have to do it again. And I've gone over there a little bit, but never mind. Now I've gone over that. What you could do before I activated it, you can use your electric eraser and you can get rid of it, but I've activated it now, so I might not be able to. Yeah, it doesn't like it. Oh, I put a hole in my page. It doesn't like it. But if I'd have done that when it was dry, that would have been fine. So I'll put a bit of a hole in the page, but it's just a little bit, you can see it's damp. But if you just keep that brush barely damp, oh no, Suzanne, these are not Intense blocks. These are Derwent Pastels. But they're not like... I've lost the lid. Where did I put the lid? There's the lid. These are Derwent Pastels. And there's 36 in a set. But they're not like traditional pastels. Traditional pastels are very, very chalky. These have got a little bit more to them so that you can handle them and you don't get anything on your hands. So that's why I like them. And they correspond with, so if I had a big space, I could use this for the big space, and I could use the pastel brush, the pastel pencils for tiny detail. And you're working so just barely damp that with a breath everything's dried. That's how dry you're working. So, and again, that's what I like. So just literally just scratching a little bit of colour. I think they're probably a little bit, let me have a look at the pencil. I think they're probably the same. But if you a little bit will come off, whereas, and a little bit will come off on this one, but not like, they're probably like the Inscribe. But I think Derwent had very soft pencils in the 80s, and people complained, artists complained, because they didn't want a pastel to be that soft. So how I describe them is, the vintage set, the set that I like the most, is what they made 20-30 years ago. And you can't even look at those without them crumbling. They're very, very soft. They're like a traditional pastel, a very expensive pastel. They just go to dust with the slightest touch. And obviously artists said they wanted something different. So they brought out this set. And this set is probably is a firm pastel. It's a lot firmer. Do you know, I don't know, Suzanne, sorry about that. Oh, sorry, Lovebug, sorry. I don't know, I'll have to have a look. I shall have to have a look. The art bars are in the other room. I'm thinking about it. There's some very pastels. I don't think they match like the pastels do these, because they're called different names. But I know that the Inktense blocks match the Inktense pastels, definitely. Sometimes you've got to remember to do the lights first, because these are very strong watercolours. The minute you touch the stronger colour, so I always like the fact that you can use a little tiny bit of water. And I've just caught that, so I'm going to let that dry and then I can go over it when it's dried. It'll be fine. And I've just used one brush and 2 sticks. So I'll pop those back. And I'm a bit sad I do leave them in order that they are. And again, they do look like the Inktense, but it says Derwent Pastel on them. To say Derwent Pastel. You can get that to say Derwent Pastel on there. Now my light is very bright, but if you can see, that's the colour. We have a red deer. So let me have a look for, I think we'll have, I thought we'd have chocolate bunnies, but I think we so chocolate, so you can use it the other way. So I want chocolate, so I'm going to look for chocolate. Oh, sepia is quite nice. There's a sepia which is 530, and I have 530. So I have a sepia, and I have chocolate is 590. So I think the bunnies might want to be chocolate. So I'm just going to scratch a little bit of colour in there. And I want to highlight, so I think I'm going to possibly use this one. I think this is ochre, some kind of ochre. This is 170. So, I mean, obviously there's not going to be as many because you have 72 in the Derwents and you have only 36, so you've only got half as many. So it probably misses every other colour. I think that says number 70. And 70 is Naples yellow. So I'm just going to put a little bit of this yellow on the bunny. So we'll do all the bunnies, the highlight. And then we'll do just a touch. There's a little bunny up here. So I'll put that one back. And then we wanted our chocolate, didn't we? Which I think is 590, we said. P590 is chocolate. So I think we'll have some little chocolate buns. And remember, this is a grey scale, so a little colour goes a long way. It's very similar to tinting photographs that were black and white quite a few years ago. So again, I can put that chocolate one back. And get my number 4 brush, twist to a point. Make sure it's just barely damp, and then just touch. In fact, I'm going to stop and use my little liner. So this one is a Graduate Daily Round liner, and it's a 10-0. And this is probably the best size. Again, just barely damp, manipulating that colour around. And that's all dried now, and it's not a pastel anymore. No, I'm going to go back to the number. I don't think I had a number 2, did I? You do have to push this colour around. And you have to be fairly quick, because obviously once you've wet it, you can't really mess about. Now I want to highlight down there, so I'm going to go back into that. So again, stroke that. And then we can bring the brown up. And you do pick up a little bit of colour. And again, I like the fact you haven't got giant water pots. Every scrap of colour that I'm using is going on my page. It's not going in the water pot. And as a tight Yorkshire lass, you know, I really like that. It's one of my pet likes, is that. And I would struggle to colour in the Bennett Kliens if I couldn't do this, because I can't use pencils, dry pencils. So this allows me to. I just want a tiny bit. I could turn the page over and show little dimples, but nothing too major unless you touch it again. If you don't touch it, that's fine. So I want a little bit of the yellow on there to give our bunny a little bit of a bobtail. And by the time you've done that, your brush will be dry, because this is just barely damp. And that allows you to do watercolouring on a Bennett Klein page. You can see where the water's been. And you can't go over it again, you can't touch it now, you have to leave it. It's a one-trick pony, you have to get it right. But all you're doing is moving a little bit of colour. So this one is $5.90, so this is chocolate. So I kind of thought I might like the trees to be a bit chocolate. And again, just twist into the water pot and then manipulate the colour. And you really don't want very much. 2 reasons. One is it's thin paper, and the other one is it's a grayscale. So a lot of the work's done for you. But what you can do, again, you can see the paintbrush is almost drying out now. The paintbrush is dry. So it really doesn't take long. He's chuntering to himself in the, in the other room. So thanks guys for stopping by. I never thought to do a Saturday, I don't know why, but so I'll hold this up at an angle because I have a very bright light here and you can see that it's dark. So I don't think they do, Love Bug, I don't think they do match. Or I haven't noticed, which is an unusual thing. So I want that to be very dark. And I kind of want that one to be dark as well. It's a bit lighter there. And then of course we've got the green of the grass. And the nicest thing about this is you can use, sorry guys, you can use the side. You can use the flat edge, if you can see that flat edge I'm using. And now we've got a bit of light again. We don't want to use the flat edge long ways. And a corner. Dunk the brush, twist in a baby wipe, and away we go. And you're almost dabbing that dust. Now if you blew or sneezed, that colour would move about your page a bit, so we don't want to do that. So no heavy breathing. And you can see you pick up colour. Now the brush is very dry, so just very gently, don't twist to a point and start again. And just manoeuvre as soon as your brush touches it, it melts into a watercolour. Although technically it's not a watercolour, but it behaves like a watercolour. But the minute you touch it, it becomes a watercolour on the end of your brush, and you just kind of manipulate it where you want. The only thing you can't do with this particular way of working with the Bennett Klein is you cannot go back over it for a while, probably till tomorrow. I would leave it 24 hours because you will make your paper disintegrate. And I just want, now I have got colour water on there, and you will probably find that your paintbrush has got enough colour on it to give quite a nice effect. Oh, bye, Love Bug. Thank you, Bug, for stopping by. Enjoy your day. Have a good time. Thanks for stopping by. So, again, just manipulate a little bit of colour where you think you need it. And then just manipulate that. And just make sure that you're not too wet, because your page will crinkle. Now I haven't done it with the Bennett Kliens. I might do. I made some homemade gesso. I made some clear homemade gesso, and you could use that, but then you couldn't use your water brushes because you'd damage them. You could use other things on it then, acrylics or whatever you wanted. So we've got 2 trees done now. So I think I may actually do this page and then you can see just how quick it is. It really is fairly quick. Because it's the brush that's manipulating the colour. Because as I say, you can't use too much water and you can't mess about. And then if you're really lucky, you can just manoeuvre it so you've got a bit of a highlight where you want one. Now, I do have some colour on this brush, look. Look at how much colour I've picked up and made. So it was enough to do the other one. Just gently stroke that down. You'll probably find that this is getting a little bit damp now. Just by twisting it is probably going to be enough water. That's just how much or how little you need. So we'll do this one next. And you can see I haven't dunked in the water pot. All I did was stroke the baby wipe. So again, where it's damp, that you can tell. I need some colour first. So that's just how damp and pale it wants to be. I think I made a bit of a mistake there, but and the other way to do it is I have picked up some colour there. It's a damp baby wipe, and there's no reason why you can't do this. In fact, this seems to be less intrusive and rough. So we could use them like you can use a block. So let's go to this side here now. Oopsie, sorry. Let's see if we can get across. So we'll touch there. You don't have as much control. But again, this is a technique you can use on a Bible page. It's so soft. And of course it's a grayscale, so you can just kind of, you don't have to think about anything, you can just manipulate the colour where you want it. Oh, thank you, Jerry, thank you. So there's two ways you can use these. And you can do the same thing with any pastel, apart from a wax pastel. Any ordinary chalk pastel you can do this with. Because it's a pigment, it's made with the same pigment, except the binder is different. And that's what separates good quality from poor quality, is the binder. And also, oops, sorry, Alfie, oh, he's got through. Oh, he's got through, Nigel. He steals the cat food in the other room. So again, we can just touch that. Sorry guys, live with Alfie. Live with Alfie.
What tea or coffee?
Oh, a coffee please, darling, thank you. So if you can see, it's a bit darker. It's just that I have such a bright light, and the little bunnies at the bottom.
Come on.
So I've managed to get a couple of. So I was laughing at Alfie. He's fine, yeah.
Where's Bongo?
He must have gone back into his room. He may be underneath. Maybe he's under the chair. He'll come out in a minute. Leave it open a bit because Bungle runs there. Thank you, darling. Yeah, Bungle knows he can run, and if the door's shut. It's a madhouse. Right, so I need a green now. So in my, I've got one or two to do down here. Just do these two little ones. But always think about the size of brush. The reason you have a big one, a small one, and a medium is because the size of the thing you're drawing. This really should be in a small brush. But oops, I didn't twist it. If you're working on other things, you could just wet your brush and go straight for it to pick colour up. But obviously, we don't want to do that. So I'll start there. I'll put chocolate away. And these would probably drop, if you drop them, these would break like ordinary pastels as well. So we've got, oh, that looks quite a nice dark green. I think I want a deep green. I might want to highlight as well. Alfie! Alfie! So again, if I didn't have the pencils, I'd just scratch a practice. I like those two. So I've got a pale. So this one is P500 and P450. And P500 is Ionian green and 450 is green oxide. So what I want to do is to just scratch, and because I haven't used these, you've got to kind of scratch a coating off them. There is a bit of a coating. And it is a difficult colour to see as well. Just see if I can get it going. That's it. You're good. They all have a coating. So and if you don't get it in exact the right place, it's not the end of the world, because you can go back in with a darker one. And then go back in. And I probably would do dabbing motions with this because it will give a really nice watercolour effect of a tree. Oh, my light's better. Hope he's turned the light on. Bless him. So we've got a really nice, just make sure that it's not too wet, so we can push that colour around. And we can also do it the other way of picking colour up and then dabbing it where we want it, where the pale is. But I think this is, it's quicker. And it's a different way to work, you know, when you want to be kind of really, really finicky, and this can be a bit freeing. Sorry guys, we had a bark alert. You've got to try and hit the light one first, because otherwise the green one would. So thanks for stopping by guys. I hope everybody's having a decent day. Again, I just like this really simple. I've got a bit of a crinkle on there. But there's colour. My light is a bit bright, so that's the colour. So you can see the colours. The red actually worked quite well. I wasn't sure about it at first. I think it's working quite well. So you could do this with Neos. You can do this with Derwent watercolour pencils. You can do it with a graphite. You scratch the colour on. And if you really wanted, you could do the scratching bit like this, and then put some tracing paper on this page, and shut the book and go away. And then when you open it, move the paper and manipulate it with a damp brush. And that's the travel watercolouring that I was talking about earlier. So you can colour the book, but you can actually physically be creative a million miles away, and your pens and pencils will be safe because they'll be all at home, because you wouldn't really want to take these too far. And again, not on the beach, because quite easily pastels are kind of soft in nature. But you could use this technique and scratch all the colour in before you go away. Alfie, Piggles, Piggles, come and sit down please. Yes, we have a dog called Pigs. We have a dog called Pigs. She was Iggle Piggle from a children's programme, and then she got Pigs. So when she's in the bad books, she just gets Pigs. But her real name is Gigi. My daughter loved the movie so much she called her Gigi. And she runs like a horse, so she was called Gigi. So I just put that up there, and when I tip them up, you can see the colours, and you can see the greens better. So they're the colours that I'm using. So it's going on quite well, I think. Well, they would be quite good with these, Suzanne. Suzanne says she's got some cool stamps from Hobby Lobby, and they were cheapy, cheap. That's good. I like that. As a tight Yorkshire lass, I like that. I mean, if you had pastels, you could use this with the inscribed one. Has half pans, and they're fairly cheap, or fairly inexpensive I should say, but they would be brilliant for doing this because they're not very expensive. There's a huge range of colours because you've only got half pans, so you get 10 pinks and 10 purples and 10 blues and 10 reds, 10 greens and 10 yellows. Of course we love that for colour books, and you can mix them. Some artists used to put the paints on the paper like this, on canvas, and then mix them while they were on. There is a word for it, but I can't remember. but this works quite well in a colour book. Again, twist the brush, which is getting quite wet now. If you did this for more than a couple of hours, you'd have to squeeze the moisture out of the baby wipe, and I just squeeze it back into the water pot, because you will find it gets saturated, and that's why you can't leave it next to your page. It's got to be away from your page, because if you put the baby wipe next to it, your pages will absorb the water and crinkle. See, it's left a wet mark there because it's damp. So you can use all sorts for this particular way. You can put the darks in first, or you can put the lights in. It's really up to you what you do. Oops, and I've put the darks where the lights should be, but never mind, it's fine. Give it a bit more contrast. And actually the dark wouldn't be the darkest up there because it's the lightest anyway. So. And you can use the flat edge of the pastel to get some nice pastel out. And then dunk and twist. And you can use this technique for when you're doing trees in watercolour. This dabbing here, this is what you do, but instead of using a damp brush, you're picking up colour. This is how you would watercolour a tree, just building up highlights and lowlights. And you'd probably do this in acrylics and oils. It's just a technique to get this gorgeous tree leaf-like effect. So I've been 52 minutes, so hopefully I can, again I'm going to use the edge that I've used. So I'm going to scratch a little bit of colour, and I'll use this technique in a different brush, sorry, in a different colour book in part 2, and so you can see how versatile they are. You don't always have to be this careful because your paper will be thicker. And if you left it a little while, you could go back but your page has to really dry, so you know you're talking a few days maybe. You definitely don't want to touch it again because this paper would disintegrate. And we'll have a bit more darker down here because it's darker. Oh, you like the movie Gigi? Yes, it is wonderful, isn't it? So if we look at Daydreams, apart from the fact it was a professional pastel, no, not Daydreams. Oh gosh, Magical Dawn, and I can't even hold a colour book with this wrist. So this is Magical Dawn, and I scratched pastel, and it's not being fixed. So I've scratched the pastel into this book where I wanted the colours, and then I've put a piece of tracing paper between and shut the book. And I did the same with the graphite, so you could fill your whole book with water-based mediums. I've activated this one, but this was Neo, that was pastels, that was Derwent watercolour pencils, all activated, all coloured first and then activated a few weeks later. There's Neos, there's Graphitint, there's Prismalo watercolour pencils. just scratched colour. You can see the pencil marks, and you can on the leaves. You can pick a leaf up. You can see the scratched marks. But then when I watercolour them with a damp brush, I shall activate those colours, and they will so pop out because they're very, very vibrant. And it's exactly the same technique. It's just adding colour and then making the page safe, and then at a later date, at the beach, at the seaside, on the boat, on a train, you just need a water brush. And the best one for this is the #1 Derwent brush. That's my favourite. It would have been, but it's just maybe a slight touch too wet for even this page. It's the only one I won't use it for Bible pages, or the Bennett Kliens. But the Derwent watercolour brush is the driest of them all. But for this particular paper type, which is very thin and very unforgiving, then you want a barely damp brush. Just put a bit of something under there. You've just got to make sure you get all the bits of dust. And the colour will change. Colours always go darker when they're damp. You have to be patient. It's not a race. Some pages take longer than others. So I'm going to pop those back. And I'll zoom out a little bit, and you might be able to see the page a little bit better. And the light may change slightly as well. Oops, so that was about 58 minutes. And we've got some nice colour on there. And if you look at the back, it's gone a little bit crinkly, but it hasn't gone through. And I could live with that because I've used a watercolour. So that was a technique I invented, and I called it watercolouring. And it's basically watercolouring with a tablespoon of water. And it lasts you all day, does the tablespoon of water. And that's all the waste I've wasted, hardly anything. Just when I had some bits of brown, but apart from that, that's my only waste. My water's still dirty, but that's what I was cleaning it on. So I love this book. But I'm restricted on how I can use it. And my light is a little bit strong, sorry about that. So thanks for watching.